the EPA documents have revealed that when you run out of water, the health department will consider your location unhealthy, and you will be relocated to an area where potable water is provided. We have found also maps on the Department of Interior documents that show force will become necessary to restrict water consumption, and forced water reduction by gunpoint will become necessary in many states. There's a map. War has been declared by those people that are creating extreme weather events worldwide. The perpetrators have determined the minimum and maximum amount of lives to be destroyed annually in a continued, overt, silent system of warfare.
Hey friends, before we get started, just a quick note about your privacy. I'll tell you what, it's astounding to learn that Apple had to force Facebook's VPN out of their own app store because Facebook's VPN was stealing users' data. If you're sick and tired of being spied on by Big Brother, get a real VPN that will actually protect your privacy. Visit our friends at virtualshield.com. Virtual Shield VPN is the easiest to use VPN in the world and one of the fastest, and their no-log policy protects users from any data breaches, and they would never ever sell your data like Facebook would. In this month, Virtual Shield is offering 70% off VPN plans and discounts on all premium add-ons, including IdentiSafe, which allows you the ability to block off computer, microphone, and camera access from any unwanted spies or hackers. You have the right to remain private. So check out Virtual Shield VPN. I'll leave the link below this interview. And now we'll turn our attention to our good friend Deborah Tavares. StopTheCrime.net and PrimaryWater.org are her websites. And today we're going to talk about weaponized weather events, which in Deborah's words are massively escalating. I want to just read you a couple headlines here today as we speak. California wildfires 2018 maps where the Delta, Snell, and Irving fires continue to burn. That's from Newsweek. And the Delta fire surpasses 60,000 acres after Thursday's flare-up. And this one, boy, New World Order headline, if ever there was one, climate change fuels California fires. On top of that, we have Hurricane Florence and so much more to talk about. Deborah, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Sean, for having me on the show today. Again, everyone, I hope, realizes that I'm here in Northern California. I'm here where continued fires are burning. We're breathing ash, soot, poisons, toxins. We're very heavily chemtrailed. The chemtrails are holding all these toxins down closer to the ground. We're literally being basted. This is the intentional aspect of continued weaponization and death and destruction, disease and illness. But I want to talk about storm surge, artificially created storm surge, and I want to have everyone be thinking about the disasters that are unfolding right now in the Carolinas and along the coast with Hurricane Florence and extenuating tornadoes and other types of horrific floods. I first want to say, because I am a victim here of the fires here in Northern California, many family members and friends and people here have lost homes. We have a massive, massive homeless community. We have RVs parked all around this county because there is no housing. So I want to say my heart goes out to everyone experiencing these weaponized weather events, and particularly in the Carolinas and along the coastlines there. I certainly have tremendous heartfelt empathy and recognize the fact that the weather weapons systems now are fully engaged, massively intensified, and this is a massive land grab and reorganization of the world as we have known it.
May I ask you one thing about that, Deborah, and then you have the floor. When you talk about weather weapons activated, and we talk about these Northern California fires, which seem to go on unabated day after day, month after month. Are we talking about, first of all, we have the Agenda 21 map. I always wondered, how in the world are they going to get all of these people off of these lands that they want to create into protected habitats where no humans are allowed? How are they going to do that and herd people into these big Agenda 21 cities? Are the fires the answer, and are these directed energy weapons being used to create these fires and stir these fires and allow these fires to continue? Is that what you believe?
Well, it's not what I believe, it's what I know. And there's a multifaceted approach to starting fires. Certainly we know that the many, many decades of overhead aerial spraying, chemtrailing, and using one of the components, which is aluminum, and of course strontium and barium, but highly combustible materials, aluminum oxide. And we have heard here from our fire marshals that the fires are burning faster and hotter than ever experienced by firefighters in the past. And the fires that raged into Santa Rosa here in Northern California during October 8th through a week or so beyond had a front of 5 miles across. They were traveling at a football field and a half per minute with advanced embers and ash raining down. The firefighters never have seen anything like this in the past. So we know certainly that the smart meters are involved. We know that Rothschild and Rockefeller are involved. In fact, I would like for you to post within this an email exchange between the California Public Utility Commission and Pacific Gas and Electric, which are both Rothschild operatives. In fact, all the utilities in the entire country are run by Rothschild, Rockefeller, and the minions of death. So people can read these emails, Sean, that I will get to you to post. These emails became part of a YouTube that was put up back in 2015, well in advance of the fires. But now I need to move on into what is additionally occurring, and this is absolutely diabolical, and it is another process. I'm going to peel it slowly but hurriedly because of the time, but I want everyone to know several things because we're going to jump into water, so let me know when I need to do that, Sean. But I want to talk about what we're seeing happening right now in the Carolinas. And one of the articles that I read in relationship to all of the flooding, because in advance of the hurricane hitting, officials were preparing toxic waste sites and other power plants ahead of Hurricane Florence's arrival. They said that it could cause environmental and public health disaster as heavy rains may overwhelm pits holding all of these toxins. Well, I want to say this about sewer treatment plants. Sewer treatment plants are a weapon of death and destruction. We do not need to be drinking poisonous sewer water. Let's talk about that for a moment here. We don't have to drink it. We need to understand that recycled sewer water is a component now being used in many countries because they're saying we are running out of water and we are not. Why would we accept the illusion that we're turning and running out of water when water is renewable? Why would we allow these corporate agents to poison all living things with this deadly silent weapon of sewer to tap? And why would you think organic meat could still be organic when many cities use treated sewer water to irrigate pastures where dairy and beef cattle graze and eat these poisons? And why would we continue to be exploited and slowly killed for the profits of the agents of death? Rothschild, Rockefeller, and their banks and corporate associates are killing while profiting. Simply, we cannot drink this toxic, deadly water. We're going to talk about water treatment plants, and then we're going to jump into sea level rise, shore erosion, and the intentional use of weapons to create the decimation along the shorelines. But many of the sewage treatment plants throughout the world are intentionally located near waterways, streams, coastal areas, and cities that have now become environmental and public health disaster zones. The deliberate and artificially intensified rain wars overwhelm pits holding the toxic waste hazards, and many of these treatment plants are then breached with the heavy rain causing flood events. Heavy rain wars, weather weapons. Sewer treatment plants are used to poison us and are now silent weapons like landmines to intentionally cause environmental and public health disasters and diseases. This is for profit. Okay. Intensified and artificially created storm surge acts like a plug, blocking rivers, streams, and creeks from dissipating into the oceans. Technologies being used to create increased flooding are many, including the blast wave accelerator and the tsunami bomb. War has been declared upon all coastlines worldwide. To learn more about storm surge, go to stopthecrime.net, look at the YouTube that we are having trouble keeping on our website, but we did this, and it's called Coastlines Under Attack, Storm Surge, Artificially Created. You will see documents that absolutely show that this is the case, proof. And also at the same time, learn the water facts. Water is a renewable. Take action and distribute flyers far and wide to spread the water facts. And in the meantime, do not drink sewer water. Listen to the YouTube Primary Water Explained. Now, Sean, they're using recycled sewer water, and it's becoming a common component now in the majority of municipal water supplies that are served up now into these human settlement zones that they call smart and resilient cities. They are not only certainly increasing all of the frequencies, absolutely taking down our DNA, causing mass mind control, but so much more. So I want to talk about the coastlines under attack. I want to touch upon this. Everyone can watch and look at that YouTube I mentioned, Coastlines Under Attack. But I want to talk about what we've discovered and why it's so important to understand what is taking place.
I just want to remind people that I think it was Al Gore's movie titled An Inconvenient Truth, in which he tried to tell the people, scare the hell out of people, that if they didn't stop global warming, the sea levels would rise 20 feet over the course of several decades. And he's been completely wrong about that. And of course, the global warming narrative has been, in large part, debunked by the science. The point here is that I think they're using what you're describing as weather weapons in these storm surges to try to rebolster the idea that the coastlines will soon be underwater if we don't stop global warming. It's all part of their New World Order Agenda 21 plan. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's absolutely the case. In fact, we have to take all of the threats that we've been told that certainly we know are being created by weapons as a fact, because we are being absolutely, literally we're becoming climate refugees all over the world. People are fleeing. This is one way in which they're clearing out cities and moving people into designated areas. Certainly we see not only climate but economic refugees as well, all types of economic and weather assaults. But I want to talk specifically right now quickly about storm surge and how it's been artificially created, because I'm quite involved with the NASA war document that we have on stopthecrime.net. I understand, too, that NASA stands for Never a Straight Answer. It's a Luciferian organization. But I want to say on page 59 what they say. And I'm going to talk about this now because this is what is happening around all the coastlines, and we're going to get into that because we have the entire government involved in this. I'm going to present documents in this discussion quickly about who is involved and what are we going to do about this. Everyone's going to have to think and contribute to the solution here. But here's what it says in the NASA war document. The blast wave accelerator, which is in the NASA war document, again on stopthecrime.net, is likely being deployed to create the new modeling for higher coastal shore erosions and sea level rising. Creation of higher waves and the daily increased heavy lapping of the waves against all the coastal seashores will cause increased erosion and is the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's coastal sea shores. The blast wave accelerator is in part causing coastal seashore erosion and also called sea level rise. There's other components with sea level rise as well. But the blast wave accelerator on page 59 of the NASA war plan states this, that the blast wave accelerator is global precision strike on the cheap. No barrel, excellent stealth, no plume. Being worked on at Aberdeen and NASA MSFC for lofting of fuel and nanosats. In 1944, the U.S. military worked with the New Zealand government and developed a devastating tsunami bomb. Listen to the number of this. To send a 33-foot wave crashing into Japan's coast, designed to destroy Japan's coastal cities, a top-secret tsunami bomb from World War II. This was the planned backup weapon of mass destruction. If Fat Boy and Little Boy, the code names for the two atomic bombs dropped on Japan in World War II, had they failed to detonate. The code name for the blast wave accelerator is Project SEAL, S-E-A-L. The weapon of mass destruction relies on a series of 10 large offshore blasts and was tested off the coast of New Caledonia and Auckland, now being worked on as the blast wave accelerator. Now, it's extremely important to understand that since World War II, we have accelerated, the controllers of death have accelerated the weaponization of the creating the disasters along the shorelines, because over 70% of populations live around the peripheral of the shore. And it's important to understand another aspect of living on the coast is the negative ions. We breathe better, we can think better, and we're less able to be mind-controlled with the negative ions. That is really the backstory behind the cooking of humanity. If you go and take a look at that, you will see that I am sitting there as I'm interviewing Barry Trower, who's recognized as one of the world experts on microwave warfare. And I am holding a document with a picture, a map of the United States. And around the peripheral of that map, you will see psychotronic weapons. And that's why I went actually to talk to Barry. And the backstory is the fact that this document that was the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology of July 20th of 2012, these are psychotronic weapons for mass mind control that you'll see on this map. Quantum computers is mind theft, invasion of the human brain with artificial intelligence. This is for the purpose of controlling all our specific thoughts, emotions, and directing physical actions into all unsuspecting human beings. The map shows the end of free will as we've known it, and information from the White House website. This is real. The image map is from the White House website, and the technologies and methodologies are described in the NASA Future War Circa 2001, and additional comments are contributed. Now, who is involved in the creation of this advisory in the White House? This White House Spectrum Management Team, which was Google Inc., Microsoft Corporation, Stanford and Harvard Universities, Virginia Tech, UC Berkeley, National Telecommunications, Information Association, the FCC, and the NSA, and many others. Now, as I said, we need negative ions, and we understand how negative ions work. Now we have to understand the primary source of negative ions. It's the generation. The generation of that is the seashore, the waves crashing onto the coastline, rocks and sand all the time. And it creates massive negative ions, which in turn supplies the entire nation with what is best described as good vibrations. And what is important to know is if there are extra electrons attached to the oxygen, it becomes negatively charged. And study after study after study on this, largely by DARPA, Stanford Research Institute, and the CIA Mind Ultra programs during the 60s and 70s, showed that humans breathing negative oxygen ions have markedly better cognitive reasoning skills, are much less likely to be mind controlled on a massive scale, and more importantly, are much more physically healthy. And so negatively charged ions are vitally important for healthy humans. Why are they decimating the coastlines and suggesting that we move inland? Because mass mind control is far more efficient. So as we talk about the blast wave accelerators, and as I started to understand what they are doing around the coastlines, my understanding followed this course of verification. In Del Mar in Southern California, a very, very, very wealthy beach community that sits down on the sand was having an argument with their city officials about an unpopular strategy that was to be written into their city codes called planned retreat. Unplanned retreat strategy due to storm surge and rising sea level. Let's talk about what this means. Planned retreat is a strategy of gradually removing all man-made structures such as seawalls, all homes, all roads, and public buildings in advance of storm surge and rising sea. Now, Del Mar, California has about 600 homes within a few feet of the sea level, and they're claiming in the city councils down there that climate change has been widely acknowledged by scientists for predicting the amount of sea level rise and storm surge. But here is what is happening. The California Coastal Commission now is requiring all coastal cities, and we have a U.S. Coastal Commission. We have a Global Coastal Commission, requires all coastal cities to have sea rise adaptation plans and to include planned retreat as part of their strategy. The Coastal Commission is telling the cities, if you fail to comply with their requirement to have this in your codes, it could result in the Coastal Commission refusing to certify the city's plans, robbing all cities of the authority to approve permits for developments such as seawalls, homes, businesses, roads, and other structures. Virtually, the Coastal Commission will assume all of the authority of our incorporated cities that don't have any authority or benefit for us in the first place, but now will be controlled by the Coastal Commission to force planned retreat upon all of us. So as I continued to look at planned retreat, I found that this is happening all over the world. I have found that in Louisiana, for example, they have planned retreat. There is an island already where they have relocated an entire town. They say to the people, you better move or you will perish. And here is an example of that. This is an article, and what I found in all these articles was everyone, even people in villages in Africa and other locations, continued to talk about the increasing lapping of waves at the edges of the beachfront areas where they live. Increased lapping. This is, of course, storm surge being created so that people won't realize the ability to control the ocean as they already have. So here we have, because of climate change, the U.S. is relocating an entire town, the Isle of Jean Charles in Louisiana. Interesting, Louisiana. And here's what it says, lapping at the edges of the front yards. Now it's just a little strip of land left. That's all we have. There's water all around us. Few outside our area know that this is even happening. Well, now all of you know. You have to look at the enormity of this assault on coastal communities that has been kept out of the media, and you are unaware the enormity of this assault, and all levels of our military are involved, as well as the U.S. Bar Association, and I'm going to talk about that. It says both towns are left with an awful choice that is going to come to many who live in coastal areas across the U.S. that are at risk of being inundated by shore erosion and sea level as it continues. Move or perish. But then they heard of an unusual, first-of-its-kind petition and competition held by the Obama administration, which offered the chance for relocation. The National Disaster Disaster Resilience competition was organized by the federal government and aimed to help communities and states recover from previous disasters and reduce future risks and help in relocation. This is forced relocation using weather weapons. So my question to everybody is this. What do we do when all branches of the military, all branches of the government, all agencies, all departments, all officials, and offices exist in a de facto status in name only in our country and abroad? We're USA Inc., we are Earth Inc. When we know the United States government was dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act in 1933, we know that the receivers of the United States bankruptcy were the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. And we know we are all the enemy. We are in the crosshairs of a silent weather weapons assault system of death, massive relocation, and evacuation. And we know that because many of you have hopefully already looked at Senate Report 93549, telling you you are the enemy. And in fact, our government today exists in name only. And we all know, many of you that are listening right now know, that weather weapons are the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate. It's weather weapons. And these climate action plans and resilient plans have been adopted in almost every city, town, village, state, country, and nation throughout the entire world. Why? In preparation for the use of massive relocations of populations throughout the entire world into classified holding tanks called smart cities, resilient cities, where you're going to be served up sewer-treated water inundated with frequencies that biologically we will not survive under. And the illusion has been created, which appears to be real, even though we know that the climate change is not because of us, but it's an extremely dangerous reality that has been engineered using the power and force of economic and weather weapons and consensus-run policies in all of our countries and cities everywhere. Consensus-run policies in the use of the Delphi technique. I won't go into that. But I want to talk about what Russia knows and what Russia has said when I was searching climate change and resilient policies in Russia, because we visited Russia in 2017, and they do have weather weapons being used there, but the people in Russia generally know that Russia uses the weather abilities to change the weather to allow the Russians to have celebrations on weekends, and they know this. The Russians know that, and in fact, it was very relieving to understand that. But this is also what the Russians know as well. They know that trading carbon quotas is pure unadulterated myth, like trading air. They also know creating false emission quotas would provide a revenue source for all government budgets. The Kyoto Protocol, they tell us, is an intergovernmental gulag. The protocols would tighten economic and environmental requirements and allow corporate control while phasing out smaller, inefficient industries. The protocols also were not based on principles of justice and equity and equality unless signed and ratified by all countries. They say existing environmental regulations are inadequate for monitoring emissions, which is false. They also say that there would be a trade-off between economic growth and all countries' emissions obligations. There is no link between climate and CO2. Hence, the Kyoto Protocol is a scientific scam. They say the Kyoto Protocol is part of the EU's conspiracy to increase cost of competitors' goods via greening. Now, I will say also that the World Bank has already created investment strategies to make enormous amounts of profits by creating global disruption using weather weapons and the creation of a completely new city structure and completely new markets. And I will say that the U.S. bar is involved, as well as all of the departments of the military globally. So let's talk about how the U.S. bar and what the U.S. bar has said. And this is important because what everyone can do is type in any agency, it doesn't matter, the FDA, the CDC, the California or the National Fish and Wildlife, whatever agency you want to type in, followed by climate action plans, including the U.S. military. They are all following the climate action plans pursuant to our executive order. And let's take a look at the executive order, which is really, really important to understand because this is designated the responding to climate action, which is weather weapons. And we can take a look at that order that was signed years back, and I'm looking for that now. But I can tell you that they're forcing relocation around all of the coastlines. And the executive order reads, this was one of the orders of September 23rd, 2014, Executive Order Climate Resilient International Development Executive Order. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution, which sadly we do not have, and the laws of the United States, we're talking about the laws of the corporate structure, and to safeguard security and economic growth, to safeguard the monetary gain and, of course, benefit, I'm just telling you this right now, of the global controls, Rothschild and Rockefeller, etc. They tell us this: the world must reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They must prevent the most dangerous consequences of climate change. Even with increased efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions, we must prepare for and adapt to impacts of climate change. So they're negating what they're saying. They're saying that we literally cannot reduce greenhouse gas emissions enough. Even with all of our efforts to curb these emissions, we still must prepare and adapt to impacts of climate change. They say the adverse impacts of climate change, including sea level rise, increases in temperatures, more frequent extreme precipitation, heat events, more severe droughts, and increased wildfire activity, along with other impacts of greenhouse gas emissions such as ocean acidification, which is being created, threaten to roll back decades of progress in reducing poverty. No, they are increasing poverty. California now has the largest levels of poverty of any other state, and we are a nation state. And I will tell you, with the displacement from weather weapons and fires and the economic structure of the lack of housing and the fact that what housing we do have in some of the beautiful areas along the coast, many homeowners have contracts with Airbnb that is run by Google, and there are heavy constraints against how you can rent out housing under those Google contracts. But going on, the American Bar Association, when you type in the American Bar Association followed by climate change, you'll find something similar to this: a comprehensive resource of laws aimed at increasing resilience and reducing vulnerability to climate change. This state-of-the-art compendium, which means a brief summary of a larger work, examines how laws are being modified, finessed, and even imagined to deal with the impacts of climate change. We have the American Bar Association signed on to the weapon weather assaults upon us, and they are creating, imagining, and modifying laws to deal with the impacts of climate change. Well, let's talk about what some of the modifications of these laws are going to look like, because we are under a coastal attack, and all the militaries are complicit in this. The Australian Department of Defense is complicit. And when you look at that YouTube, Coastlines Under Attack, shore erosion artificially created, you will see, because I explain, and you will see the documents. But you can look at these documents as I have. And when I found out that the military has signed on to implementing all of the facets of climate change, which includes reducing CO2 emissions and reducing all use of resources and moving us into smart cities, resilient cities, the military is going to be doing this. And one of the documents that I looked at, one of many, many documents, is called the Military Expert Panel Report, and they say this, and this should be jaw-dropping for most of you. As military professionals who have spent their entire adult lives serving the United States, we are concerned about the impact of shore erosion, sea level rise, and our ability of our military infrastructure to sustain our nation's operating forces and fulfill strategic objectives. It is clear we must do something to address these risks, and we need to do it soon. There are growing numbers of studies exploring the actual and potential physical impacts of sea level rise on U.S. military installations, and these studies show that risks are increasing at a faster rate than expected. And more important, questions remain only partially answered. One thing is clear. We cannot wait for perfect information. Listen to this. One thing is clear. The military cannot wait for perfect information before assessing the risks and impacts and responding in a way that must be met with these risks. Dealing with climate risks to operational effectiveness must therefore be a core priority. This report looks out in time to assess the effects of sea level rise. They go on to tell us, this report rests on the assumption of climate stability and instability, including the stability of 95,471 miles of coastline, along with which 1,774 U.S. military sites reside across the globe. Major transportation command and control, intelligence, and deployment hubs will face unrelenting erratic outages or curtailment of operations in the future due to storm surge and sea level rise. The ability of the Department of Defense to fulfill mission requirements will become more costly, take more time, and be hindered by the lack of planned-for assets at critical junctures. All these threats to coastal military infrastructure play out over this century. We may become strategic and have vulnerabilities that could affect our ability to deter our enemies, defend our interests, protect our friends at a time and place of our choosing, and we may not have a choice in the future. To use U.S. military as a theater is in essence flooding. They go on to say the report is not an exhaustive look at all of the climate risks and vulnerabilities that coastal military installations are facing. But they say, however, it is something that needs immediate attention, and the military, all branches, are planning to relocate from low-lying areas. It says in April of 2016, the Department of Defense released a report entitled Regional Sea Level Scenarios for Coastal Risk Management and Managing the Uncertainty of Future Sea Level Change and Extreme Water Levels, such as what we're seeing now battering the Carolinas. They go on to say that this is one of the most expansive publicly released efforts to date, details the methodology used to develop a range of scenarios that will serve as a starting point for vulnerability assessment as well as planning and decision-making for coastal management. I found this to be really unbelievable that the Department of Defense estimates the replacement value of the structures that they use in the Pacific to be nearly $180 billion. What is being discussed in this document is the relocation of military bases, infrastructure, equipment to higher ground. It is diabolical to think that this is occurring and none of us has been aware. Here's a quote, protecting the jewels of our crown of capability. In a July 2016 speech, General Ron Keyes, United States Air Force, retired, described his concerns regarding sea level risks to some of Virginia's key defense sites. He said, "We have 19 bases that we consider jewels in our crown of capability that are going to be affected by sea level rise. And it doesn't have to rise 8 feet. It only has to rise a couple of inches. A good northeastern pulls in, and all of a sudden we're underwater. If you look at Langley Air Force Base, that is an example. We need to start considering what we can do now. now I can build a moat or a barrier around Langley Air Force Base. But the problem is a lot of my people live in Newport and live in Hampton. A lot of my electricity comes in from the outside. My fuel comes in from the outside. So at some point, we get to the point, I've got to move to higher ground. And we have started talking about that because that's going to be bloodletting when we tell the congressman from Virginia that we're picking up Langley Air Force Base and we're going to Oklahoma. That's not going to play well. And we need to be talking about this now. Now, this is across all branches of military. Now, let's jump into what's happening with water, because we're being attacked and assaulted on all fronts, all fronts.
Let me just jump in and say one thing before we move on to water. I believe water is a basic human right, and they're going to use water. They have been using water as a weapon on multiple fronts. They're doing it in Syria. They're doing it all over the planet. They're doing it in Africa. They're going to do it here, too. And water will be used as a weapon. I just wanted to make one note before we move on. You told me here before we officially started the call that in Dublin, Ireland, and I just Googled this, it's shocking. They're telling their citizens there's only 70 days of water left. So that gets us into the whole idea of primary water. Folks, the earth creates water. It doesn't just fall from the sky when it rains out. So we're going to talk about that. I wanted to say one last thing, though, about weather and weather as a weapon. As you know, Deborah, they've created weather derivatives. So these same demons that create so much of this havoc then get to bet and front run what they know is going to happen, because in many cases they create the weather, they shape the weather, they stir the hurricanes, they direct the hurricanes. And I'll just read you this from Wikipedia real quickly. Weather derivatives are financial instruments that can be used by organizations or individuals as part of a risk management strategy to reduce risk associated with adverse or unexpected weather conditions. Unlike indemnity insurance-based cover, there is no need to demonstrate that a loss has been suffered. Settlement is objective, based on the final value of the chosen weather index over the chosen period. See exotic derivatives for more information. So imagine the Rothschilds, richer than anyone can imagine. Now they get to bet through the derivatives markets on weather events that maybe they have foreknowledge about. I mean, would it shock you to believe it, folks? I think that's what's probably going on. I'll turn it back over to Deborah. We have about 10 minutes left, Deborah, if you want to talk about primary water.
Yes, I want to add this because everyone needs to understand we have a smoking gun right now, and it is the fact that Volkswagen in Mexico has been accused of ruining crops planted near one of its factories in Mexico by using a technology to alter the weather. So very briefly, what has happened is the Volkswagen manufacturing company has been being assaulted by another corporate agency that is using huge snow golf balls, huge ice golf balls. And so Volkswagen is using hail cannons to disperse the weather events when these golf balls are landing and damaging 150 acres of newly created and manufactured vehicles that have not yet been put into distribution, that are sitting out. And they're saying that in order to show good faith, they're not going to leave the automatic mode on their hail cannons, that they will operate this manually now, and when the meteorological conditions determine the imminent fall of hail, they will turn them back on. They're also saying that they're planning to install anti-hail nets over more than their 150 acres to protect its cars. So they're under assault, corporations assaulting corporations. This was prior to probably the arm twisting to get Mexico to sign the new trade agreement. But having said that, I've got to talk about smart meters and smart water meters and the dangerous plans to ration water and how millions will be dying. So this is my comment. You can find this posted up on stopthecrime.net, but I'm going to tell you my comment now. And this is very, very urgent because wireless metering plans to monitor every drop of water usage and extraction of water everywhere is occurring. To control the population, relocate populations by causing mass immigration into monitored settlement zones or smart cities where water usage will be highly restricted and you will be served up sewer water. Now, not only is Dublin in Ireland being told they have 70 days of water left, that's probably maybe down to around 60 days because that has been up now for at least 2 weeks. But they're also prevented from using what they call pipe hoses, and we're going to get into that. But I want to bring back everyone's attention to zero-day water in South Africa. What the illusion of running out of water created there was the movement of populations because of the fear that they were running out of water. Just look at some of those photographs taken with the villagers standing there at spigots, only being able to be given a little bit of water. But more close to home, in Mountain House in California, just a little, maybe a half hour out of San Francisco, a few years ago, a property was purchased by Rothschild. It was set up as a smart city, a resilient city, and they used it as a stage, a movie stage, to create the idea that that city, Mountain House, was running out of water. But we caught them. We called, our research team called the realtors down there to find out how were they going to continue selling new homes if they were out of water. And the realtors there had no knowledge that this was being spread throughout the country. You can look at articles. Don't let this fall out of sight. Mountain House in California. This was one of the first stages of the illusion of running out of water. And that land was purchased by Rothschild to build this smart community on. So I'm moving on here. Unauthorized water usage will be a criminal offense with imposed fines and water disconnections. All water will be tracked, monitored, and data-driven allowances of water distribution will be determined by regulators. Our corporate government agencies have adopted UN policies that impose harsh sanctions on perpetrators, all of us. High costs of water will limit many people from accessing water while imposing hardships on girls and women to meet basic sanitary needs. Neighbors will be asked to snitch on their neighbors, and drones will be launched to surveil water cheats. Smartphone apps are used by neighbors to anonymously photograph a water violation and send the information to code enforcement. Local water agents, code enforcement officers, police, and the sheriff and the military will become enforcement authorities to restrict, cut off, fine, and imprison those who exceed their water allotment. Right now in Ireland and in the UK, there are hose pipe bans, which is simply hoses for our vernacular, which are planned water usage restrictions. The water agencies say will help to ensure that customers continue to have the water supplies for all their vital needs. People cannot use a hose to water gardens, wash cars, fill or maintain fountains, ponds, and so much more. Should you live in the country or in rural lands, the EPA documents have revealed that when you run out of water, the health department will consider your location unhealthy, and you will be relocated to an area where potable water is provided. We have found also maps on the Department of Interior documents that show force will become necessary to restrict water consumption, and forced water reduction by gunpoint will become necessary in many states. There's a map. We are being told that we must reduce our water consumption because we're running out of water, and we must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to prevent changing weather. War has been declared by those people that are cheating and creating extreme weather events worldwide. The perpetrators have determined the minimum and maximum amount of lives to be destroyed annually in a continued, overt, silent system of warfare. This is very important right here, Sean. Reducing our greenhouse gas emissions will not alter the weather. Climate change is the result of the deliberate large-scale manipulation of the Earth's weather. Geoengineering, aka the deliberate weather manipulation, is a weapon of mass destruction. The goals of the destroyers are many, and their plans are causing global suffocation of the Earth by reducing water that plants need to absorb CO2, which creates oxygen for people to breathe. We are being suffocated. Further, the deliberate increase of air pollution causes the rise of carbon dioxide, CO2, and the decrease of oxygen, causing global suffocation. Decreasing water decreases vegetation. We are now being restricted from using hoses to water gardens and are encouraged to use fake plastic turf to replace lawns. Many cities are not allowed to water roadsides, landscapes with drinkable water. They have to use sewer water. Intentionally forcing the climate to change is causing our forests to die off, further reducing the carbon sinks, which in turn provide oxygen we need to breathe. Remember, the Earth is the water planet, and water is a renewable. We are not running out of water. So I recommend everyone go to primarywater.org, and in the meantime, do not allow a smart meter on your wells. Should you live in the city, team up with your neighbors to stand against wireless smart water meter deployments as best you can, because in Ireland they call them the water fairies. And what happened in Ireland is, prior to the attempt to deploy water meters on the people, which never were charged for water, because Ireland has now been put into an artificially created drought, and water was always free for the people. So as the water agencies, the utilities, again run by Rothschild and Rockefeller, attempted to deploy water meters in some of the areas of Ireland, they called them the water fairies. These water meters were dismantled. So let's just say that prevented the continued rollout of the meters. So then that's when they created the hosepipe ban, the restriction of water with the deployment of drones overhead to surveil. Now the people in Ireland can only use a watering can to water their gardens in their backyards. And I will tell you, lawns are dying, parkway trees are dying. This is the deliberate suffocation of the earth. This is intentional. This is a plan. This is what has been one of the end goals between mind control, so that we do not understand what these words mean. We think we've got to reduce CO2 emissions. No, we need more plants. We need to survive. We need to live. I would say choose to survive, choose to live, and spread this information out far and wide. And in the meantime, do not drink sewer to tap water. It is killing us, and it is being used as landmines for weather weapons attacks to poison the aquifers. Now, I have many water YouTubes up. You have to understand how water works. We're going to be having more water YouTubes up, because right now in Southern California, in Santa Monica, they've just now created a private well drilling ban. No private wells to be drilled. Interestingly enough, Santa Monica only has one private well. So therefore, none of you know that this is going nationwide. What they are doing is they're putting in a scheme called groundwater allotment, where cities will have to buy in to get a specific allotment. Now, what is happening in the farm area in Ventura County here in Central California on the coast is the farmers can trade their groundwater allotment and make more money than the value of growing and raising their crops by selling their allotment to a neighboring farmer, so that that farmer will have enough water to grow the crops and water the crops for the season. This is the plan. The plan goes further into absolute food control, moving all of our traditional agriculture practices into controlled, literally Monsanto-style food raising. This has already been set up. There are already organizations that are out there now creating the systems and the nets to capture all of us in this diabolical reality that we find ourselves falling into. And when you have me up next time, Sean, I'm going to talk about not only how the climate action plans and the resilient plans are occurring and have occurred, but how they are being funded and who the funders are and what the intention is. Keep in mind, this is a weapon of mass destruction. All the climate action plans you can type in your city, followed by the words climate action and resilient plans, and you will find your pre-crime criminal plans have been adopted by your criminal cities. And I will tell you, your mayors, vice mayors, city councils, board of supervisors are complicit in the local takeover. Originally, the motto or the discussion was go local, think global. Well, the assault is local. Your cities are bringing this into you. They're accepting grants. They're running advisory meetings with the illusion that people have the ability to participate in the adoption of these plans. You don't. You don't. This is a psychological conditioning brought over to the United States by the Tavistock Institute, officiated through the RAND Corporation and the Brookings Institute. Understand, we've been taken. We've been taken. And we've been substantially poisoned to the extent that we can't think. So I would say wake up out of your stupor. Do not eat any flour and sugar. Stay away from Cinemix, SENOMYX, and clean up your food supply and what you eat right now as best you can. And get yourselves into right thinking so you're not foggy thinking. And try, of course, not to have fluoride in your water supply. Sadly, most municipal water supplies have been treated with fluoride on top of drinking sewer water. So go to the solutions page on stopthecrime.net. We're attempting to add solutions. I will tell you we're tumbling ahead of weather weapons here, though, in Northern California. PG&E, who is Rothschild-owned, Pacific Gas and Electric, who is our electric supplier up here, who actually caused the fires. Again, there is an email exchange that I would wish that everybody would take a look at. And Sean, I will make certain that you get this so that you can tag this into this interview. This email exchange, it is diabolical. Everyone needs to understand. Here in Northern California, as a result of the fires, we find that there is a speedy and very fast takeover of our county by Rothschild and Associates. And our motto here is evacuate, ready, set, go. And one of the intel people that I speak with said when they evacuate large swaths of areas, that's also when they send in operatives to bug homes, particularly some of the very high-end homes, they bug them. It's worse than we can possibly imagine. We have found other documents that suggest that we're going to have massive dust storms, along with again, ocean acidification, things we've never heard of before. But people will ask, where can we go? Where can we move? Where can we be safe? Well, I would tell you to do this. Wherever you think you might be safe, look at that city's climate action plan. Find the section that discusses the climate change effects in that location. You're going to find the way in which they're going to use weather weapons to assault you. For example, in a climate action plan that I'm looking at right now, they say that the climate change effects, there will be increase in extreme heat events, increased air pollution, floods, droughts, wildfires, storms, changes in weather patterns, higher food prices and food scarcity, sea level rise, storm surge, longer red tides, toxic algae blooms. Does that ring familiar? We have a state of emergency in Florida over toxic algae blooms right now. They say that the examples of health effects and risks as a result of those particular weapon assaults on us will be heat-related illnesses and death, worsening of chronic health conditions, increased respiratory illnesses and seasonal allergies, injury, death, waterborne illnesses, foodborne illnesses, massive displacement. We've talked about that. This is weather weapons causing climate refugees. They talk about stress-related disorders, mental disorders, I want to add this: increased hunger and, of course, decreased nutrition, injury and death, wastewater systems impacted. They're telling you right here, wastewater system impacts because of storms and surges. These are being used as weapons. Again, mental illnesses, poisoning, and contaminated shellfish, and more. So look at your climate action plan. Find out what they have in store for you in your area. Weather weapons are being used everywhere. So I want to I guess, conclude this by saying it's worse than we thought. It's far worse than we can imagine, but we have to link together. We have to pray. We have to understand that this is happening, even though we know that climate change is not a result of too many people using too much stuff. It was a cover to activate the capabilities of absolutely causing death and destruction. And we know from the intel site Deagle.com that I did a interview with Dr. Bill Deagle on. You can find it on stopthecrime.net. It's entitled 5G, and it goes into the way in which the United States is going to be murdered, how we are all going to be murdered. The percentage with maps and charts in the United States is a reduction of population by 83% by the year 2025. You can look up Australia, you can look up the UK, you can look up Sweden, you can look up any country. It's a map that you can check and see what the planned reductions of population are. Choose not to be in that percentage. Choose to make decisions that will not cost you your life. We're all here for a purpose. We are here to spread the truth. We are here to create safety as best we can by creating the information that people need to make the best decisions that they're able to, given the diabolical nature of what we face. Diabolical. So I think that we need to reach out to our family and friends, make amends, live in love, live in right conduct, and live your life as best you can, knowing the enormity of what we face, because I believe that we're human beings here in a spiritual experience and in a physical experience. In our spirits are in our bodies. So this is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net, wishing you all well. Sean, I'm looking forward to coming back up because I have some additional documents to discuss. I want to go over the who's doing it. I want to name names. I want to talk about the corporations that are behind this, the massive amounts of financing and money. Of course, many of you might, realize that the Clinton Foundation is massively funding these takeover plans and many other. We're talking Citibank. We're talking many of the insurance companies are behind this, MasterCard. Many of the corporations that we do business in, we're literally funding and paying for our own demise. And we'll go over that in our next program, Sean. But this is just a diabolical reality that we find ourselves in. It's hard for me to even know what to cover on a program, Sean, because I'm here living in smoke and ash and soot and massive displacement. And in fact, in our recovery program, there's a film made here of Northern California, and I would recommend that none of you watch it because you're watching the destruction, and the film is called Urban Inferno, The Night Santa Rosa Burned. Let me tell you, all of the proceeds of this movie are going directly into the resilient funds. This is Rothschild and Rockefeller. They are using the footage in real time, the first 10 or 12 hours of the night Santa Rosa burned, to make money to fund the programs that are taking us down. So before you contribute one penny to any disaster relief, find out where the money is going. If any terminology of resilience is mentioned, it is part of the funding, again, and contributing to the financing of Rothschild, Rockefeller, and all of the organizations that are funding the absolute destruction of every country and absolutely destroying the United States of America. I would also recommend that all of you watch Kill Cities by Rothschild and Rockefeller. This was taken down, well, not taken down by YouTube, but the count was taken off and all the comments were taken off by YouTube. This YouTube ended up in the Washington Post, and it is a reality. Your mayors are involved, your cities are involved. Take a look at that YouTube, Kill Cities by Rothschild and Rockefeller. Please sign up to stopthecrime.net for our blast outs and frequent our YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deborah, let me just jump in here as we wrap this thing up. I try hard not to interrupt when I have you on because you are one of the most passionate activists out there, and you're a keeper of knowledge that many of us don't have. So I want the audience to forgive me if they thought I should have jumped in at any point to ask questions or challenge Deborah on any of this information. One thing I will say as we wrap this up, Deborah, is you used the term diabolical. You used the word diabolical, and that is the exact appropriate word for what's going on. For anybody who believes that any of this is fear-mongering, I want to just share one other word with you that Deborah just referenced about 5 minutes ago, Cenomix. Cenomix is an American biotech company working toward developing additives to amplify certain flavors and smells in foods. And I'm reading this now from stopthecrime.net, Deborah's site. When Obama was president, they ruled that Pepsi's use of aborted fetal cells in soft drinks constitutes ordinary business operations. Folks, they're putting people in the sweeteners. And if you think Cenomix is just in Pepsi, no. It's everywhere. That sweetener is being used, I guarantee you, it is in products that are in your kitchen cabinet, and you owe it to yourself to research Cenomix. It's spelled Senomyx, and it is the very definition of diabolical. And Deborah, that's just one example to try to help support what you're saying. There are diabolical plans. This is spiritual warfare against humanity, and it is being carried out by the elite that run this planet.
It absolutely is, and I can only say the email exchange from Pacific Gas and Electric, I've just pulled that up now, and if we have enough time, it's just a couple of paragraphs, and I could read it now.
Yeah, go ahead and read it, and then we'll wrap this thing up. It's very, very important. It talks about the pre-knowledge. They knew exactly what was going to happen before all these fires broke out. These devastating Agenda 21 fires. Go ahead and read it.
Okay, so this is an email exchange between the California Public Utility Commission and Pacific Gas and Electric. Both are run by Rothschild. If you think your public utility commissions are managing your utility corporations, they are not. So this was dated August the 22nd of 2011, and it was to Brian Cherry, and it was from and a copy to the California Public Utilities Commission. So it says reference, space weather, from Brian Cherry. Just a reminder, we are the first to propose a solar generator in space that will beam RF waves down to a receptor site and convert it to DC current. We have changed our receptor site from the Mojave Desert in California to Sebastopol, California. That's where we live. The response from the CPUC from a Paul Clannon is subject again, space weather. Brian, I assume you're assembling a high-level task force of washed up and never were, yet somehow movie star handsome, former astronauts to handle PG&E's response to the upcoming damaging space weather. Also, please dribble out, one at a time, over the next few months, all internal memos, lawsuits, PowerPoint presentations, and officer cover-up directives in which PG&E is repeatedly warned about damaging space weather and chooses to do nothing, then has its lawyers blame its customers, aka earthlings, for any adverse consequences resulting. Thank you.
It's unbelievable.
Now, it's important to know that PG&E has pulled permits to conduct a weather alteration here
Deborah. Well, folks, that was weird. The call after 1 hour and 17 minutes just failed right in the middle of Deborah speaking, and I think that is a sign we should probably wrap this one up. Deborah, I want to thank you so much for your time, your activism. We will definitely get you back on again as soon as you want to come back on. And, folks, you can track Deborah's information and follow her closely at her site, stopthecrime.net, and learn more about abiotic water, about the earth-producing water beneath our feet at primarywater.org. Our guest has been Deborah Tavares. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Sean.
God bless. And guys, thank you so much for all your support. Thanks for tuning in to sgtreport.com for real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. God bless. Bye-bye.
People like Hillary Clinton don't give a damn about the people they claim are their supporters. They're interested in one thing alone, which is their power, their ability to do whatever they want and to get away with whatever they want. Whether it's child trafficking, whether it's launching wars, whether it's accumulating huge amounts of wealth, that's all they care about.